Welcome everyone. This is the US session about snappy interfaces, and I'm joined by Gustavo and Sigmund, who, basically dreamed up everything about snappy interfaces and implemented it. And they're going to give us a quick introduction first before we're going to talk later on about how we're going to get more interfaces brought up and what the workflow is going to be like, and other questions. Sorry, I just had another video.
Do you have anyone that wants to join us?
Yeah.
So, Zygmunt, do you want me to cover the initial aspects of interfaces, or do you want to have a quick rundown to?
I don't know. You can go because I just feel so good. I can discuss all the details later.
Okay. So interfaces in Snappy are basically the way that snaps declare the dependency both on system features, on system resources, and on features offered as well by other snaps. In fact, even basic, because we have the Snap OS, so even the basic operating system primitives, let's say, they're also modeled as a snap in the system that can be updated just like any other snap. So if you have a snap system running, or if you have 1604 at hand and you install a snap, the first snap you install, you bring down the Ubuntu Core snap, which contains the basic files and the basic libraries that every other snap can depend upon. And that same snap will also declare some plugs and slots, which is the two ends of an interface, right? So the slot is the end that let's say provides the feature, depending on what we're talking about, and the plug is the side that consumes that feature and can make use of the resources that are provided by the slot. The terminology, as you can see, is quite open-ended and purposefully so, because we have to be able to mediate and to map all kinds of resources that we have in the software world. So we chose those terms to try to get out of specific terminology that could create confusion, right? So let's say, for example, if the snap, one example we've seen actually during the announcement that people were super concerned about the X11 interface, right? The X11 interface enables a snap to connect to the desktop on the system, and to show itself as a window and to be able to interact with users via a graphical interface. So these for that to take place, basically one snap in the system, which is the Ubuntu Core snap, has a slot named X11, and a snap that wants to use that interface declares that it has a plug X11. And once the system or the user connects that establishes that connection of that interface, then the snap will be able to use X11. Of course, X11, as we all know, is an insecure protocol, right? So that application could do some nasty things in the system, having that sort of access. Still, it's being able to confine that application is still a better approach than to have it unconfined, right? Because it's harder to explore, for example, security bugs on the application that are unintended, and it also enables the developer to be more and the user to know that, well, that's what actually is being used on that application. And if the X11 is disconnected, the application actually loses access to that connection, right? So that's interesting, both because the snap has a clearly declared set of resources that it needs. It needs X11, it needs access to a stereo port, it needs access to your web camera, and so on. And it gives control to the user about whether it wants certain connections to be established or not. The system can have a say about whether it thinks that that connection should be established, and the user can have a say as well, saying, no, I don't want that connection to be established. And so besides that, some connections, some specific interfaces are also cause the snap to pass a manual review to make sure that it's basically sensible, right? It makes sense for that snap to be using that sort of resources on the system. And so this is the basic idea about interfaces, right? It's a system that enables snaps to talk to each other and to consume resources provided by other snaps or by the what is traditionally seen as the operating system itself, and allows that to be done in a clear way, in a visible way. And there's a security system that is aware about all those connections, that allow confinement rules to be created, allowing that snap to be acting in certain ways in the system and accessing certain resources in the system, whether secure or not, right? The security is of course dependent on the behavior of the snap. We could think of another example where this is it's always there's a matter of trust and there's a matter of confinement, right? For example, once you have your phone or once you have your system and you choose to give access, let's say, to your contacts to a given application inside a snap, of course, if that snap has poor intentions about what to do with your data, this is a really bad thing, right? And it's not about confinement. We confined the snap, but there's still a step of trust about the fact that the snap will act properly with the data that was explicitly handed to it, or the access to the resource that were explicitly handed to it. So I hope that clarifies a little bit those ideas. And one interesting aspect as well about interfaces is the fact that if you look at them, you can see that an interface is a way for people to collaborate around certain ideas without having to be explicitly talking to each other. What do I mean by that? Once you have, for example, let's say, I don't know, location interface, right? Let's say you have a location interface. You know that all the snaps that have the location interface can consume a location service that follows those same protocols, those same rules on the other end. That means that both ends of that picture are interchangeable, right? We could create something else or a different version of that same snap that can provide those same resources, and we could allow those snaps to be replaced by other versions, by improved versions, or by completely different implementations that still preserve the basic protocol in place, which means that the software as a whole continues to work. So this is one interesting property that interfaces put in place, and that we continue to explore, and that's going to create some very interesting properties in the near future. What else can we talk about interfaces?
I think many people, I've been monitoring IRC over the past few weeks, and I've seen many people try things out, and they're just not familiar with interfaces as a concept. So I think the things we're going to do over the next couple of weeks is improve the documentation a lot and make it visible, find the documentation on developer.ubuntu.com, so you're going to be able to find the introductory articles about what interfaces are, documentation about the existing interfaces, information how to work with us to create a new interface, or debug your application if you're developing a snap that doesn't work for some reason without development mode, and you're not quite sure why it doesn't work. So we're going to help people out create applications by exposing all the information we have is just not surfaced, or creating new content when there's none.
Yeah, so, thank you. Actually, that's a very good point. The interfaces we have in place, we have several of them in place, but the interfaces we have in place are all but finished, right? This is one of the most important tasks for us to be running through in the next few weeks and the next few months is to really pay attention to what people are attempting to do with Snappy, and to make sure that it's the interfaces that are missing are implemented and well supported. We want to establish a very quick round trip for when people start to experiment with something and they find out that they're missing a particular interface, to the moment we get that interface in place and released and available to the end developer to be playing with it. So this is, if you feel like you have a need that is not properly covered by the current interfaces, please do reach out. The IRC channel, Snappy IRC channel, or Ubuntu, is it Snappy or Ubuntu Snappy? The Snappy IRC channel on Freenode, and the Snappy-devel main list as well on list.ubuntu.com. Those places are a good choice for us to reach out to people that can do it. Zygmunt is one person that is always interested in hearing about that. Jamie Sternborg as well is always around, and he would be happy to help with the security-specific pieces of that puzzle. So please get in touch with us, and we'll be very happy to hear and to help out.
I'd like to also add the fact we have a special tag on Launchpad. So if you open a bug on Launchpad and tag it with a snapd-interface, you're going to see it, and we're definitely going to look at it, because as you just said, we want to allow all the app developers to do what they want to do, to create newer applications, and we're going to work on making those interfaces be there on time. So release the 1604 and everywhere else. So snapd-interface on Launchpad on IRC, just ping us. We're around almost all the time. We're in different time zones. And also, we have two mailing lists. I think we should mention those mailing lists. We have Snappy Devel and Snappy App Devel, which I think we're all monitoring as well. So there are plenty of ways to reach out to us and discuss things.
Can you maybe do we also have some examples on how to offer interface, how to make use of interfaces? Do you know if there's anything in the docs maybe?
We have a couple of examples of the snaps offering an interface or consuming an interface, because right now one of the interesting things to notice is that right now most of the interface slots come from the OS snap, but it's not going to be the case that this is always going to stay like this. We're having new interfaces designed for things like Network Manager, BlueZ, for location, and for Pulse Audio, and we'll see those snaps show up in the store where we're going to have a slot for this type of connection. On a classic system, you're going to see, on your normal 1604 desktop, you're going to see this offered by the OS snap, because this is going to be, deb installed system packages, but the interface is going to be the same. So keep this in mind, that you will see new snaps showing up with those big interfaces, that essentially each of these interfaces unlocks a whole class of applications. When you get BlueZ, you can snap a lot of games. You get location, you can snap a lot of interesting applications in the IoT world. Same things with BlueZ. Network Manager, I heard that lots of applications are actually currently blocked because the Network Manager interface is not available, and they just check if network is online or offline, and they don't really need to configure the network, they just want to know this notification. And as soon as this interface is going to be around, you're going to have more and more examples of how snaps can both offer an interface and how snaps use one of those existing interfaces. I know one of the sources of examples is obviously Snapcraft itself. We're going to have, I'm not quite sure how to organize this, but I think we're going to have, or we already have a repository with example snaps for the desktop, and I think it would be worth to extend that to add a snap for each of the interfaces we have, and just document this and expose this very well. I think right now the biggest problem is that people are unaware of how things work. Those concepts are new, not familiar, and they're just trying to reach out, they're Googling for things. And we should just make it easier for them to find the right content and to build the content if it's missing.
Yeah. Just a quick note on the repository you were talking about. We're going to have a session, the last session of today is going to be called Pen Snapping Software Together, and that's what we're going to discuss, how to build this repository and how to work on it together.
Great, good points.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I forgot
I have a
which
question.
question I had, but there was
I have
one
a
on
question
IRC.
online.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a
Yes.
question online. The question is, are you considering having the ability to dynamically add interfaces versus built-in interfaces? So I think there are two sides to that question. One of them is the ability for a snap to dynamically declare that it has or offers some interfaces. And in the sense of, well, I could have a serial port, or I could have 3 serial ports, and so on. So this is dynamic, right? In that sense, yes, we'll have dynamic interfaces. Another aspect is whether we envision the ability to dynamically add new kinds of interfaces, right? So beside having serial, we would have a new kind of interface that is unknown to the system, and that the system will then learn about from installing a snap, for example. This is may come at some point as well, but it's a much trickier problem, because when you add a new interface, the interface could contain anything, right? The interface is precisely it defines the confinement rules. So if an interface is broken or wrong, it basically breaks down the whole security system. So it's trickier to dynamically support adding new confinement rules into the system without first passing through a round of reviews on it, right? So we think that's one, at least for the time being, a good way to force that round of reviews is to have a central repository of those interface kinds that is controlled and has some good carrying eyes on them. I hope that answers the question.
I like also extend this with the fact that interfaces are not just for security; they also allow people to exchange those two sides of the interface, right? So maybe you need to look at like a single snap that needs to do something that's currently not supported, and this seems like a solution, right? I'll just add my own interface that is going to essentially support just my own snap. But I think in principle, if in general the idea would be, okay, I'm going to add a new interface, and how do other people find out that there's an interface they could be using in their application? So I think this is a very tricky problem. We're going to still look for a solution. But from this point of view, it's also not desired to have like an interface that just exists in a single snap, because people would like to use that interface to communicate with the snap they have. Right? If you look at Network Manager, Bluesy, and all the other things, all of these snaps take some resource, a physical resource or software resource, and expose it to other snaps as a service, right? And that's how how other snaps can reach out to those things. So I think it's a tricky problem, and we're going to look for a solution, but it's not
Well,
really desirable.
it's a tricky problem in terms, right? I think it's, again, this is very much, to me, it's not so much a tricky problem to solve in terms of it being um, um, technically challenging or something like that. It's more like, to me, there's a clear pattern that we need to follow to be able to have something sane, right? For example, we have a single namespace for interfaces. So if it is a single namespace, it has to be somewhat controlled. And again, we're talking about both the ability for things to talk to each other and about confinement rules. So we cannot have allowed the system to just be completely unreviewed, because otherwise the confinement has no point, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise people can create new rules that completely break the confinement, and suddenly all the systems are insecure. Snappy, again, Snappy mediates access to resources which are today insecure. So, for example, we just talked about X11, but the the goal for the system is to eventually remove those insecure interfaces and replace them by better approaches that enable us to go more and more and more towards having a completely confined system. So, for example, X11, we're talking about MIR and the MIR system and Unity 8 in the very short term, right? So it's already working to some degree and being tested next in 16.04, and we think it's going to be in a much better shape in 16.10. So that's sort of pattern that we want to establish, right? We want to have more control and more confinement, so people are more able to install software from less trusted sources and knowing more about what's going to happen when they install that software.
Have another question. What are your thoughts on connecting interfaces? How is this going to work in the future? Will there be more auto-connecting bits? It's an interesting question. So I can already tell you about some of the problems we saw people encounter. So they currently auto-connection only works when the slot is offered by the OS snap itself. For instance, when you have a network slot and your application wants to talk over the internet, it's just going to get auto-connected. But for instance, things like BlueZ itself, BlueZ is shipping the BlueZ slot. And this is not currently auto-connected. So I think there's going to be more discussion about how we want to offer auto-connection in these cases. And also, if this means this need for interactive partners. So maybe you have just one candidate, and that's fine. Maybe it's a safe thing to connect, so we're just going to connect. But maybe it's not safe, or maybe it's actually there are multiple candidates. Which serial port would you like to assign to your application? So I think we're going to definitely explore how the connecting works and how the UI paradigms around that evolve.
So auto-connecting is mainly about the user experience, right? I don't have any questions, Zygmunt, about whether we want BlueZ to auto-connect or not. I would say we definitely want it to be auto-connected. Because there's generally going to be a single way in the system to be able to make that snap work, right? So what the decision to auto-connect or not is going to be based on different things, right? Right now the system is fairly simple. Right now the system is mainly based on whether whether it's secure enough and whether we can have that snap connecting in a way that will do the right thing. In the near future, we're going to have a system that is coming, is already well evolved internally, that will allow us to be more precise about which snaps can be trusted to do certain things and which snaps are perhaps not so trusted because either we've never talked to the developer or nobody has reviewed the code and so on. So we can have different policies about how what being trusted means, and so auto-connecting in the near future will become that mix of, first, do we trust that snap enough to be able to offer its auto-connection for that specific interface, and then second, is the interface, can the interface be properly decisively connected in a way that is what the user expects, what is the experience is what the user expects. So once those two things are established, then we auto-connect. Otherwise, we don't, and we let the user connect it manually if that's the intention.
That's supposed to be part of the assertions work, and do we have a timetable on when that might land?
So assertions, to be clear, a lot of assertions has already landed, right?
No, you're right. I meant this specific bit.
Yeah, but just to give a feeling to people, the assertions work is already in place, largely in place, and it has already. We have major pieces of code already working and integrated and so on. So we have the last, as you know, we have the last few pieces that are the still needed to be fleshed out, but that's going to be taking place in the next few weeks. It's not a lot of work. By now, we're pretty close.
We have some more questions. There's an interesting question about whether it's going to be possible to filter apps in the store based on the interfaces, like what kind of things can I use my camera with, or what kind of things will supply me with the required interface. And I know there's some work ongoing on this. I don't know exactly how soon it's going to land, but I think the answer is in general is yes. It's just the scope that I'm not sure of.
So I would give a more contentious answer. I would give a maybe answer, right? Because the problem is mainly, it depends on what you're asking, right, Sergio? If The question is whether the store could offer that feature. Yes, I think it should offer, and I think we should allow people to filter when they want to filter. If the question is whether we should hide the snap because an interface is not available, then I'm not so sure. I think this is, we had a few discussions internally about how to make that work or not, and my feeling is I'm too hardened about the issue. On one hand, it may sound comfortable to only show you what you can actually install in your system. At the same time, it's always every time I had that experience, it's very frustrating, right? To know that something is in the store, you know the name, you know what it does, you know it should be there, and you don't see it because the system is hiding it for you to prevent you from being aware at all that the thing exists. That's a very frustrating user experience. So I personally would try to engineer the system in such a way that we can show it exists and show if you can install it now maybe and give you the opportunity to maybe fix it, right? Let's say if something needs a web camera for working, you can plug a USB camera and solve your problem, right? Even if your system doesn't offer that interface right now, you could easily get it. And in other cases, it may be impossible for your system to grow the new interface because it's not dynamic. But even in those cases, the being able to see that you lack that specific detail in your system to be able to do the action is a much more user-pleasing experience than simply not seeing it at all, right? So I don't know. This is again, I'm talking about a debate, right? I'm surfacing a debate that is happening. There's no decision about it yet.
And we have a couple of more questions. So, will any snap be able to provide interfaces? Is it just a matter of documenting the slots somewhere in the snap declaration? So, in principle, yes. I mean, you can just define a slot or a plug on your snap, somewhere in your snap, either on a specific application or for all applications, and that will just work. But having said that, interfaces verify if the declaration is safe. So, for instance, some slots will not be allowed on any snap apart from the OS snap. And as Gustavo mentioned, we're going to also introduce additional features which will allow us to say that for things that are very powerful, we may need to first analyze a snap or just have some kind of relationship with the developer to allow this to happen. But for development, you can certainly do this. So yes, you can just simply add those declarations into your snapcraft file, and they will work. Okay, I think we have one more question. So, do we know who's working on interfaces like BlueZ and Network Manager? Maybe they could serve as examples. We could point to in the docs. So, yes, we obviously do. There are lots of people working on this, and I'm pretty sure we want to surface those interfaces and the snaps behind them as big examples of how complex snaps can work, and both for users trying to use them, for developers trying to add similar snaps that fit into the infrastructure. And I think we should do this. I'm not sure exactly what the format is, but it's a clear thing for us to do. We have a lot of things to do on documentation. It's just one of those things.
Right.
Yeah, maybe I'll take an action to just ask on the mailing list, and so we can at least point to the ongoing work. And as soon as we have more and better documentation, we can replace it.
Agreed.
We have one more question. We've talked a lot about interfaces and out connection. Do we ever plan on prompting the users for these instead of either out connecting or not? I think Jamie is interested in this kind of question because it's a very hard, like a security should be a yes or no question.
Well, I mean, it all depends on the user experience, right? If you're on a device that's like an IoT device where you don't have a way to prompt the user, all you have is to auto-connect or not. Maybe the gadget snap or something like that would play a part in all of that. If you're using something like WebDM, there is a user experience that could be provided that could help with connections, and that upon install or something like that. And then also something similar if you have like the phone. there might be an opportunity there to connect perhaps at the time of access as opposed to upon install, etc. Really, these are user experiences that need to be defined. I'm not a big fan of installation prompts because they tend to be just click-through. People say they see a prompt that says, this app wants to access X, Y, and Z, and they say, yes, I want to install it. They don't look at X, Y, and Z, right? So we have to make sure that we design the UX tastefully and make sure that it works well. And right now, what we have is auto-connect and not auto-connect, but the other things will come up.
Yeah, exactly. And this is you're spot on, Jamie. I think the goal here is to have a system that tends to be secure, right? It's of course there's a lot of on that road. There's a lot to be done still, but the simply prompting gives a false sense of security because people tend to approve it. People tend to say, yes, I want that software to actually work on my system, right? X11 case, right? People install an application and it says, do you actually want it to work? It's like, yeah, I would like it to work, please, right? So the it's not a single answer, right? Also, the having both security and a pleasant user experience is a long road that we'll have to there's some big roadblocks ahead. And so X11 is one of them that we're working on, and I'm really glad that very soon it's going to be solved. There are many other small ones that need solving as well. And auto connection, the experience on auto connection, I think is going to be a mix, right? It's going to be a little bit of how much we trust the Snap, how much we trust the developer, how much what's the danger of that interface, right? And ideally, the system would not ask; the system would do it, right? If the developer is very untrustful, then just don't connect it, right? If we have Mir and the X11 and we have a lot of old snaps, well, we're going to have some time of migrating towards Mir, right? So there's going to be some time where we cannot just obsolete X11, but at some point we will just stop connecting X11 altogether, right? It's like it's not going to auto-connect at all, and if you try it, you'll be warned that this is a bad idea, right? So it's a migration towards security, right? We're leaving a system just now that was completely insecure, right? So once you install a DAB, a lot of people don't realize it, but any DAB has root in your system. It doesn't matter if it runs as a user or not. The actual DAB, the content, has root in your system because the scripts that are inside it are run as root, right? So if we're migrating away from that, and we're already seeing several benefits on specific areas. We're not migrating before anybody panics. We're not migrating entirely away from that. I mean, Ubuntu is still Ubuntu and still Debian, and that whole process is invaluable to us, and Ubuntu Core would not exist without it, and it's going to be around for a very long time. We don't have any plans of obsoleting it. But for certain specific tasks, let's say PPAs, right? Or let's say we have partners such as MongoDB shipping their own binaries and their own DABs, right? So this is not coming from the Ubuntu archive. It's not coming from the Debian archive. It's already coming from outside. It's already coming from another place. For those cases, it's an improvement to be able. It's an improvement for them because they have a lot more freedom, a lot more freedom to decide when to release, what to release, which dependencies to release, how they want to do it, right? And it's also an advantage for the user because there's a lot more control about how that's being done, right? For my machine, what are the interfaces that thing requires? Even if it's insecure, I still know that, well, MongoDB requires those specific interfaces. Some of them are completely secure, some of them are less secure, but at least it's clearly defined. So we're moving from that old system into that new system. So there's a long road for us to have a perfect system, and we're paving it, right? We're going ahead and we're paving it, and at some point we have a really nice system. We made some great inroads. We made some great advancements in the last several months, and we'll continue towards that in the upcoming ones.
I have an interesting question. Can we establish many-to-one or one-to-many or many-to-many relationships using interfaces? So the answer is in general yes, although we don't have examples of how this would work. But we did explore, at least theoretically, a couple of ideas. Like maybe you have a managed switch and you want to install an application on that switch, and maybe some of the network ports will be assigned to your application, while other ports will be assigned to other applications. This is just like a random example. But in principle, the API supports this, so if a suitable interface shows up, and there's a useful use case where this will work, I think we can definitely allow this.
Yeah. So in one case, we already support it and we use it, right? To be clear, we already have one-to-many, right? You can connect several plugs to one slot, right?
Yeah.
So this is already in use. There are other cases which are also supported technically in the system. The system would accommodate those needs, but we don't have examples yet where that came useful, right? So if we see problems that would be better solved by having something like that, we can accommodate that in the system. It will really depend on the use case. So we need to talk about details if that shows up. So,
I have one more question. I think about interfaces for server applications means that it simplify, unify, reduce the work of charms, Snappify Juju. I think this is a very interesting question, but I'm not super experienced with Juju, so I'm not the best person to answer. Gustavo, what do you think?
Absolutely. I think, yeah, interfaces are generic. They will be available for server applications and for client applications, for desktop applications, for IoT applications. There's no constraint. The only detail to keep in mind when you're thinking about Juju is that the system we're talking about is really confined to a single machine, right? Something like Juju has to handle the interfaces across machines. So those are complementary in some ways, and they cannot really replace each other, right? We cannot have a system that is connecting to a snap interface that connects to a different machine and is confined across the network. That doesn't exist, and it's not in our roadmap either. So Juju still has the Juju interfaces still are solving a slightly orthogonal problem, and they should continue to exist. I have another question that was before that, actually. I don't know if this has been asked before. Can we rename the currently existing Snap deb package to something else, because it's causing a bit of confusion among the users? It's a good question. I'm not the right person to answer that, but it's a good question. Maybe it can be renamed. We need to talk to the. Jamie, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I think I can. Honestly, I think this is already solved. It was the Snappy package was named Ubuntu Snappy, and there was already another completely unrelated package called Snappy in the archive. But just before release, Ubuntu Snappy, what we're talking about here, Ubuntu Core Snappy, was renamed to Snapd. And now there was no other conflict. Of course, Snappy package is still in the archive, but at least it's somewhat clear in terms of the package.
Right. We have a package named Snap, was his point as well. It's not a conflict, but it's a package named Snap, S-N-A-P, which is a sequencing thing.
I don't see a package named Snap. There is one named Snappy.
Yeah, it's in universe science.
Maybe I missed it. It's entirely possible.
Yeah, we should talk about it at least.
On the upside, since
yes,
Snap
there
is
is.
pre-installed, Snapd is pre-installed. Nobody's gonna really apt-get install Snappy or Snap. You're just gonna have it. But I think yes, there's some place for confusion amongst users.
Yep. Another question. Is there preferred transport for interfaces? No. This is so the question is there preferred way to do interfaces? Because like we were saying, some interfaces happen over an HTTP API, others happen through dbus, and so on. In general, no. The Snapd and the Snappy framework is made in such a way that we can mediate access that is to accommodate what the software is doing, basically, right? So I think there are better patterns for doing certain kinds of things depending on how the application itself, how the process itself is supposed to be used, right? So, for example, if you have a web server, likely you're going to have a REST API because it's already in the same domain. If you have a system that is most concerned with the desktop, then dbus tends to be a good option for certain things, let's say. Snappy should not have a saying about if you want to do something in Snappy, that's how you should do it, right? I think the proper mentality to keep in mind is more like how is my system supposed to be used? How are those systems typically coded? And then you make a decision based on that, and Snappy should accommodate however you decide that your software is better put in place. Snappy should accommodate your needs, right? So that's why you see that variation, right? Certain things happen over REST, other things happen over dbus, and so on. Taking our example, the Snapd API was made so it can be remote, comfortably accessed via remote means as well, right? So that's why we chose the pattern we did, and I think that's really. If you have any questions about something you want to do, I'd be happy to take that offline as well. Feel free to reach out. Any other questions?
At this time, no. So, Gustav, what's your favorite interface?
My favorite interface? That's a really tricky question. I love all of them. I really like the fact that we can actually see what is happening to a given software, to a given piece of software. What is the needs of the system that this given piece of software has, and having the control to take them in and out. I think this is what I love about the system. I mean, I'm not particularly attached to any one of them, but the ability to control them, the ability to know what's going on, and this is fantastic. I'm not used to that before. It's a really good thing.
Yeah, maybe as a quick reminder while people think of the last question to ask, if you're working on interfaces, if you would like to see new interfaces, just bring it up on the mailing list. There's the Snappy Devel mailing list on list.ubuntu.com and the Snappy App Devel. We're both watching both of them. And you can file bugs on the Snappy project, or is it the Snapd project?
So you mean the issue tracker?
Yeah, yeah.
So launchpad.net/Ubuntu Core, Ubuntu-Core is
Ubuntu-Core. Okay.
Place. Yeah, it may change a little bit because we're reshuffling just now. We're reshuffling a few things in that area. We're trying to have Ubuntu Core being the project and then having a few sub-projects inside it, so we can group Snapcraft and so on under the same Launchpad project. But if you go to launchpad.net/Ubuntu Core, you'll find your way in.
Brilliant. Yeah, so just find a bug there and tag it with snapd-interface. So it's good to look at that.
Yeah, and always feel free to reach out. I mean, we are online most of the time. We have people online, Jamie, Zig, and myself. And if you reach out over the IRC channel, we'll be around, and we'll be very happy to give you some initial guidance and to work with you to understand what's the best way to put it in place.
Yeah, it's also great to hear what you guys are working on.
It's our pleasure.
Right. So it looks like there's no more questions. I guess we can wrap it up early if you don't have any last points you would like to make.
I think that was the key points really. I mean, Zygmunt, Jamie, do you want to say anything else?
No, looking forward to the first games people snap.
I will mention one thing, and this will evolve. I know that it's something that's going to come up, and I just sent out an email on it. For those of you who are used to Snappy for Ubuntu Core 15.04, you may recall a snap called Snappy Debug. Snappy Debug, as of yesterday, has been updated to work with interfaces, so feel free to use that while you're working with it and working with dev mode. Did anyone mention dev mode? That might be.
Oh, that's a very good one. That's a very good one. Please go ahead.
Well, as you probably know, whenever you install a snap, you get a default confinement. And we talked about auto connect versus manual connect. And when every snap has the default confinement, and then you connect interfaces that will expand its confinement. When developing a snap, especially right at first, it might have some assumptions in it that don't work within, say, the Snappy file system hierarchy. So one thing that can be very useful is to install a snap with --dev mode, DEVMODE. And that will install the snap in what's called complain mode with the security sandbox. So everything will be allowed, but things will be logged. And so then you can develop your snap, and you can see the accesses that it's doing and what it maybe shouldn't be doing. And if you use Snappy Debug, it'll try to make a few suggestions on what you can do, like use this directory for temp or use this directory for writing out files and that sort of thing. And then when you're all ready, you can turn off debug mode, install the snap, and then hopefully it'll work. And if it doesn't, that's when you can continue to use Snappy Debug, ping us on IRC, file a bug, etc.
Oh, we almost missed that one. Thank you very much, Jamie. That's perhaps one of the most important points of the meeting.
Sure.
This is really handy, right? Because otherwise you'll be completely blocked from even developing the snap. So instead of blocking everything, you can always choose to install the snap in development mode and iterate and know what's broken and so on. Reach out to the developers and make sure that your interface is actually supported, and you can keep going instead of being blocked. And then when eventually everything is in place, you can just, all right, now it should work, and then you can disable the development mode and get it running.
Yeah, I've really come to appreciate it. 15.04 had a different way of doing things and generating the sandbox policy, and what it would do would be you would say in your snap packaging, I want to be unconfined. Well, I like this better because the snap is exactly how it's supposed to be. You do dev mode, and you can still see the denials. With unconfined, you wouldn't see anything. Everything was allowed, but you'd never see anything.
Right.
And so, yeah, you don't have to go back and forth toggling your snap YAML or snapcraft YAML, and you can just keep iterating, and you're not blocked. So, and it allows people to demo and everything else as well. So, yeah.
Oops.
We have one more question. Is there a documentation page that lists all of the available interfaces? There is one in Snappy source code that I think we should really surface this better and improve this documentation. So it's one of the additional things for the documentation. I'm going to talk to Daniel later on about where we could actually put this, and we're going to schedule some content-making sessions.
Yeah, and to be clear, I mean, documentation is one area that we're doing poorly, and that was partly due to the run-up towards 16.04, which was really intense. A lot of work was put into making the system itself work, and we left some of the documentation behind for that reason. So now this is a good time for us to start again polishing the documentation, making sure people, and even for ourselves and for everyone to be able to remind how the system works, what are the interfaces available. Soon some interfaces may start to have some parameters. We're going to have to know about those as well. So this is documentation is an area that has to take a lot of love in the next coming months.
And there's a session on it one day, right, at EOS?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's tomorrow sometime. Brilliant. Right. Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone, for the questions, and thank you guys for answering all of them. And I guess I'm going to see you in the other sessions.
Indeed.
See you
Thank you
later.
very much, Daniel.
Goodbye,
Thank you.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.